Chapter 2, Corporate Governance Mapping Survey. The mapping survey was developed to determine the key issues that this CG initiative of the ECTT must address to be of maximum relevance and impact for companies. The result of this report were used to develop the ECTT CG assessment tool and toolkits and to shape the awareness and sensitization session. The mapping survey sought to answer 3 questions. What are the corporate governance profiles of the ECTT target companies, and therefore what are the key CG issues that the target companies are facing? What are the relevant local and international laws, standards and guidelines? These laws, standards and guides are determined by both the standards that must and can be achieved and those for which target companies should get some feedback on where they currently stand in relation to them and what they can do to avoid risks and benefit from good corporate governance. What is an appropriate CG framework to be used by the ECTT? The ECTT mapping survey results show the following. 2 of the top 3 benefits that companies expect to gain from improved corporate governance are related to improved perception by those outside of the organization. Better management of corporate risks and other benefits associated with better organizational performance then form the second highest group of benefits. The second perceived benefit is increased business opportunities and greater attractiveness to investors are among the third highest group of benefits, just a bit lower in frequency compared to the second group of benefits. A robust business ethics framework within the organization strengthens an organization's corporate governance and yields similar practical benefits, specifically lower risks. A responsible business develops processes with which it identifies, assesses and manages a whole range of factors liable to pose a risk to its social and financial performance. These processes help owners and managers plan, organize and control the enterprise's day-to-day operations to minimize risks to its capital, earnings and reputation. Integrity and reputation. An enterprise's reputation for integrity is important for building customer loyalty, recruiting and retaining the most professional and honest employees, becoming the business partner of choice, winning local community acceptance, and increasing access to capital and credit. Expanding access to capital, credit, and foreign investment. Business ethics program may increase a responsible business's attractiveness to investors. Before making a loan, international lending institutions and domestic banks perform due diligence to determine whether an enterprise is well managed. Larger profits and sustained long-term growth. Engaging in responsible business conduct does not always deliver immediate results. However, in time, a business ethics program, including infrastructure and processes for the continuous monitoring of compliance with laws and ethical requirements, should help an enterprise become more reliable and stable. A business able to demonstrate its ability to prevent and detect violations of laws and ethics requirements earns greater confidence from its stakeholders. This confidence can lead to an appreciation in the value of its stock, wider access to capital and credit, new clients, customers and partners, and more opportunities for expansion. Increased international respect. Adherence to principles of responsible business conduct encourages compliance with laws and regulations that require a high level of transparency. When the generally accepted business practices of a community are based on sound standards and reasonable expectations, fair competition is the norm, and responsible businesses can operate at a level playing field. Fair competition may encourage trading partners to reduce trade barriers such as tariffs and quotas. In this question, we ask what consequences companies expected from weak corporate governance. At the top of the list, respondents saw an unfair competitive environment emerging that is damaging to all. The unfair competitive environment emerging that is damaging to all is also related to the increased costs of doing business that survey respondents associated with poor corporate governance. Survey respondents also said that they would suffer as an organization because they would lose revenue, management would be less effective, risks would go up, and several other negative impacts. This shows, therefore, that corporate governance impacts both the performance of the individual firm and has a negative impact on the corporate environment. This response to this question shows, therefore, that corporate governance impacts both the performance of the individual firm and has a negative impact on the corporate environment. Within a context where many people perceive corruption to be widely prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago, and within an environment where both local but to a much greater extent international laws dealing with anti-bribery and corruption are much tougher and cover a much larger number of offences to which companies operating in Trinidad and Tobago also exposed the findings that, with respect to the prevalence of third-party assessment, was surprising. Even when we include all categories of third-party assessment, including the safe to work, shows that few, only 8% of respondents, are actually assessed in some way that may relate to third-party due diligence, even though they and their partners are exposed. This is therefore an area of concern and needs to be addressed. It means that many companies are operating in a high-risk environment and are not taking sufficient precautionary measures to assure high sustained performance for their companies. Chapter 3. Corporate Governance Assessment and Business Ethics. Business ethics is part of board tasks and board processes. The Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago's Corporate Governance Maturity Framework was developed as part of an Inter-American Development Bank-funded project aimed at improving the practice of corporate governance in private and public companies in Trinidad and Tobago. The framework, grounded in international best practice and customized for the Trinidad and Tobago context, addresses the specific corporate governance practices relevant to 3 types of organizations. Closely held companies, which are private and non-public, where a majority of shares are held by one or a few owners. Listed companies, companies listed on a stock exchange. State-owned enterprises, organizations where the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has controlling interest. This corporate governance framework guideline will provide the essential guide for directors, board members, CEOs, and senior managers of these organizations as they work towards a higher level of best practice maturity in corporate governance. The maturity indicators relating to the establishment and working of a business ethics system within an organization can be found within 3 board task indicators. These board task indicators are 1. Indicator 8, Directing, Delegating and Monitoring. Indicator 8, Directing, Delegating and Monitoring, is important in that regard because these are the tasks through which the board directs the establishment of a business ethics system, delegates responsibility for implementing it so that it works, and monitors its proper functioning as part of the governance practice of the firm. While there is a separate module dedicated to explaining the details of Indicator 8, it may be helpful to recollect that there is no legal baseline for this, but a board shows that it has understood its responsibilities in a professional way when it adopts the responsibilities formally in a written document, and then undertakes concrete steps that are reflected in board minutes and should demonstrate advanced corporate governance practice if it would be focusing its activities on finding ways in which it optimizes company performance. The second board task indicator is Indicator 13, the whistleblower policy. This allows the board to be informed of illegal or unethical practices and protects the whistleblower from reprisal. Such a system allows for any violation of government regulations or company policies to be easily identified and managed, helping to minimize any losses from damage to the company's reputation or from a decline in its competitiveness and the productivity of its employees. Best practice: the board puts in place a whistleblower policy to communicate illegal or unethical practices to the board. In addition, the board ensures the protection of the whistleblower's identity and their rights. Policy considerations. A proper whistleblower policy must consider the interests of the person or persons who is or are the subject of the complaint, the interests of the whistleblower, responses and investigatory procedures that are complete, thorough, and non-threatening. Independent oversight. Oversight of the whistleblower policy is conducted exclusively by independent, non-executive members of the board. In some cases, the Audit Committee is responsible for reviewing arrangements by which the company's staff may, in confidence, raise concerns about possible improprieties in matters of financial reporting or other matters. In such cases, the Audit Committee's objective should be to ensure that the arrangements are in place for the proportionate independent investigation of such matters and for appropriate follow-up action. Finally, Indicator 18, Ethics Policy. This establishes the values and principles the company uses to inform and conduct its activities. These describe the moral and ethical climate within which the company wishes to operate. A code of ethics should be sufficiently detailed to give clear guidance, accompanied by a training program, and be widely communicated. In addition to the code of ethics for the board itself, companies are expected to have a written ethics code for staff and connected parties, such as suppliers, consultants, and agents, and systems to ensure that the precepts of the ethics code are understood, agreed to, and being followed. The board needs to ensure that this is done. Best practice: the board contributes to and ensures that a company code of ethics exists and is implemented. These indicators are described in greater detail in Multimedia Module 1 that forms a part of this series. The purpose of the Code of Ethics is to reduce risk and increase performance by demonstrating the company's commitment to the highest standards of ethical behavior, encouraging proper ethical conduct and sanction misconduct within the company and its connected parties, and developing an ethical culture implementation system based on such standards and conduct, led by the company's directors and management and followed by employees and connected parties. Implementing a code of ethics involves the development of the actual code and its implementation in the organization. The development of a code is done in the context of a clear strategic vision of the company and an analysis of its business ethics risks in relation to different activities and stakeholders, both internal and external. Once the code development process is complete, the company must have the requisite structure and resourcing for implementation. The required staff systems and processes must be in place to operationalize training, communication, and management of the business ethics process. Every person should sign that they have understood what the code says and that they are able and willing to abide by the code. A standard code of ethics will include the company's values, the company's ethical principles, ethical standards for the company's relationship with its stakeholders, that is, employees and officers, customers, business partners, government and community, society, and environment. Implementation description, that is, processes and responsibility, means to obtain advice, and training program.